It's the Gardenerd Tip of the Week podcast, where we spend time chatting with expert gardening guests and we ask for their favorite tip. I'm Christy Wilhelmi. Thanks for joining me. Today, Robin Jones of Honey Girl Grows returns to the podcast. I'm really glad to have her back. Robin designs, builds, and tends organic edible gardens and apiaries, that's beekeeping, folks, for resorts and Michelin star restaurants. She works to create habitat for pollinators and butterflies through designing biodiverse ecosystems. Thanks for chatting with me, Robin.
Hi, so thrilled to be here. I'm your number one fan.
Oh, and you. So this is good.
I
We were talking before we started recording, you are one of the busiest women I know. So what have you been up to lately?
am just completing a double Michelin star restaurant in LA, Melrose, Providence. I'm completing their install of a really unique garden that I haven't announced yet. It is a rain gutter garden on the
Ooh.
walls and high production, and the goals are really exciting. They are to have, of course, the freshest harvest possible. Nothing will be on a truck, so the flavor and everything will be harvested by the chefs in the morning. Um, but also to offset the amount of those plastic packages.
Yeah.
We'll eliminate all of the need for that because they will never have those single-use trays coming to the restaurant again. And then we've also created a habitat by planting these beautiful plants, and they're also having access to plants that you can't buy necessarily at the farmers market. And
Mhm.
there could be flowers that most farmers don't grow. A lot of specialty items we can grow whatever we want now. And so it's a high production, it's low expense, and it's a rain gutter garden that's vertical, and it's in many walls, and it's on a rooftop on Melrose Avenue, and it's good and hot, and we've got two hives up there. And to avoid impacting our native bee species surrounding, we hived existing bees that beekeepers had saved from residential, your compost bin, your owl box, your roof, your shed.
Your
What
water
we could
meter.
Your barbecue,
Yeah.
exactly. You guys don't want them there, but
Mhm.
you also don't want to spray pesticides in your ecosystem, so you call a live bee removal service, and then I contact them, and instead of those people having to have 100 or 50 hives in their yard, which is terrible for the ecosystem of native bees, then I take them off their hands and put them in a neighborhood that is where they were probably in someone's roof or whatever,
Nice.
eaves.
Now I have to ask you, because you use the words high production and rain gutter gardens in the same
Yep,
sentence, and
I
I do
did.
not associate those two things with one another, because most rain gutters don't have enough root space and they get hot and people don't water them enough and they fry and nothing grows. So what are you doing that works?
Um, well, I have invented my own row cover that is
Ooh.
custom sewn, and we really haven't had a problem with them getting hot, surprisingly, because I mean, we're probably 110, 120 up there on a really warm in these latest days. Um, it's really hot up there. So as hot as it is on the ground where we're all whining, it's hotter up there. So, and I've touched them, and I've actually put my hands in the soil, and I'm impressed. Kind of like those galvanized tubs that people grow gardens in. It's kind of a myth that they get hot.
Mhm.
So they can be hot on the outside, but not hot in the soil internally.
Okay.
So the other thing is that a lot of Mediterranean herbs, not all, but many of them are extremely shallow rooted. You can also do berries. You can do all your little petite leaves, the majority of them. It also depends on what size you would want to harvest. These chefs are harvesting most things at a really delicate, beautiful size that needs to be put on a plate with a tweezer. So
Okay.
if you want a giant kale or a gigantic cabbage, you're not doing it in a rain gutter.
I see. So they're doing mostly microgreens. Is that what's going
Micro,
on?
they're not microgreens, but they're petite.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense, because then they don't put too much of a burden. There isn't too much of a burden on that system.
Right.
Okay. Well, that makes
And there's
sense.
been a tremendous, we have raised beds as well, but there's been a lot of strategizing and mapping of what goes where and
Okay.
appropriate to the root size.
That makes so much sense. Yay. All right. Well, thanks for clearing that up for me. Now,
Sure.
I recently saw on Instagram you were doing a big honey harvest with culinary students, I think it was, or maybe
That
chefs.
was those
Oh,
chefs.
chefs. Okay.
We
So
had
talk
a
about it. What was
five.
that like?
Oh, it was so fantastic. We had a 5-gallon harvest we installed those hives in the spring, and they had a 5-gallon harvest. It's typical to harvest it either in spring or by August is very typical for me in LA. And the other time we get a really good flow is January, believe it or not. Um, People don't know it, but urban spaces are much more supportive of all pollinators and then our wild spaces. So hillsides that go brown, that means there's nothing blooming. I've had a farm, I've had things in wild, beautiful, beautiful ocean view spaces that in Laguna Beach that or Malibu that went totally brown once
Mhm.
we get to August, and then they're brown all the way through December, January. So those spaces don't support bees well
Mhm.
of any species or pollinators of any kind because they're round. There's nothing growing. You need
Right.
things green and flowering to support them. So this urban space is really doing great, and they had a 5-gallon harvest, and we left so much honey for the bees, and I can't believe it. I checked on them yesterday, and they're growing into the next box, which I put on. I put on like here, this will help mitigate the heat. It's an empty box up here just for heat to rise to. You guys aren't going to be up here. Nope, they're up there building. So I added one
Oh,
more.
and did you
Yep.
put frames in there or no?
In one of them I did, and the other I didn't.
Oh, okay. And they've taken
Yeah.
over. Oh my gosh, that could be a
Yeah.
big mess, but it's also kind of very nice of you to do
They're
that.
succeed. Yeah, they're succeeding, and I'm there often enough that I'm not worried about it
That's
going that
good.
quickly. Yeah. But I'm happy that they're succeeding despite this crazy heat and everyone turning their irrigation off.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, Now you were talking about the importance of having, of course, pollen and nectar for the bees. I recently sent you an article that I had seen. The Learning Garden recently sent out a newsletter that had a link to a report from UC Davis, and it was called Bees Per Gallon. And I sent it to you. I was like, "This is up your alley. Tell me, let's talk about this on the podcast." So let's talk about that article and what you want to talk about it.
Right. So I was going to talk about really quickly. So if we're all being coming more and more aware every year, and especially this year in the longest heat wave that we've had in Southern California ever, um, and the worst in who knows how long in
Mhm.
my lifetime, possibly. Anyway, we're all becoming more aware that water is, precious, and we're in big trouble in our state, especially, and we need to be more conscious. And we're getting water regulations, so people are thinking about it right now. And if thinking about it and you're making plans of what to do, um, you know, we all know that you can replace your lawn and have something that looks just like a lawn, and you can even mow it if you want to spend extra money and time.
Mhm.
Um, and you can even have it be kid proof and soccer proof, etc. There are that many varieties of native grasses. Some of them, if you let them flower, even support pollinators. I had a friend who I consult with who just called me in a Mayday call because he planted clover in next to a pool, and it's
Mhm.
a neighborhood house, and all the kids from the neighborhood come over. So you want to do this carefully. You want to
Right.
choose your, yeah, like not all of them are concerned, but some of them are. If you are planning running barefoot, not a good idea.
Yeah, as a kid who stepped on a bee in a clover field when I was a kid, I was like that memory is indelible for me, but that was before I discovered beekeeping.
Yes. So as a kid, apparently as a toddler growing up in the valley, I stepped on a lot of bees barefoot. I have no memory of it, but
Better that
anyway,
way.
yeah, no kidding. We're all thinking about our water, and we need to be thinking about what's going to replace our water thirsty landscape. And when we do, a lot of people turn to succulents and have in the last many years. And That's unfortunate because while they're beautiful, they only flower one time a year,
Hmm.
most of them, the majority of them. I could be wrong, there could be an exception. And um, they also get leggy and require more maintenance than people realize to make them look good. And it is possible to have evergreen, and it is possible to have 4 seasons of bloom in Southern California. And it's even possible to have native, those are all native plants I'm talking about,
Hmm.
by the way. And it's even possible to have flowers that you can cut and bring in your house with this, and to have it all be extremely low water use. So what is extremely low? It means watering once a week to every 7 to 10 or even 15 days. And some of these, a lot of these native plants, that's the water use that they require. So it's very, very easier to achieve than people know. You do need to convert to drip. It will save your life. It will save so much water.
Right.
You will be allowed to water on days that are outside of the regulation because you will still be well under the regulation. So drip is a lifesaver, and drip is what we all need to chant. That is the mantra.
That is the
Drip and
mantra.
native. Drip
Right.
and native.
And just to clarify that, right now, Los Angeles is under, I think we're at stage 3 or stage 2 of the water restrictions that go up to stage 5. And until we hit stage 4, drip irrigation and food crops are exempt from the restrictions. So
Right.
that's what makes it wonderful to have drip.
Exactly. Also, drip will save your life in a garden. Your garden will survive despite you.
Right.
And that is a miraculous thing because we're all humans, and stuff happens. So it keeps it joyful when you come back and it's not all dead and you still get a harvest despite being, not there. Um, so while we're thinking about losing water and losing um, or having to change out, or getting to think about it as an opportunity, getting to change out our landscape or choose what we plant that's smarter, it's really important to not just think about water saving plants or less thirsty plants, but which plants in that realm can produce the most food to support our ecosystems, and not just are they simply not as thirsty and attractive. It's really important to balance that. So we can call that bees per gallon. You're going to be supporting so much more than bees. You're going to be supporting butterflies, and you're going to be supporting, all the bee mimics, we call them, because they look like bees, but they're not. But they're
Mm.
really critical pollinators, like hoverflies, and their babies eat more aphids than any ladybug. Um, and so we want them in our garden. And, there are minuscule, teeny tiny little wasps that are such beneficial friends. And there are non-stinging docile wasps that will eat your caterpillars, that eat your crops off your plants that you want in your garden, and they're not aggressive or defensive. So there's so many other critical pollinators we need, and we can feed them all, but we have to know which plants are the least thirsty that also provide that food.
And what are
Next,
those plants?
yeah, okay, so what I'm going to say is, what you want is a flower. You want a flowering plant. Those are surprisingly sometimes bushes and shrubs and trees. And National Geographic did a study of where the honey in a hive came from in Los Angeles. You can find the study. They looked at it in the lab, and it was very surprising where the majority of it came from. Bushes, trees, and shrubs.
So
So
National Geographic
flowering.
study showed that most of the honey in Los Angeles came from bushes, trees, and
Trees
shrubs
and
that
shrubs
flower.
that flower.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
So
perennials.
yep. So when you just turn your water off, you're affecting them
Yeah.
tremendously. Yeah.
Right.
You just took their pantry away, basically. And so flowering plants create nectar. Nectar is the sugary juice in a flower. The plant has to be flowering to have it. And it also has to be open. The flower has to be open to access. Um, Nectar is the carbohydrate for pollinators, and pollen is the protein. And both are necessary for honeybees and many native bees. And both are necessary for some other species of pollinators, but usually it's just nectar. So which plants use the least water that also have, an abundance of nectar. That would be okay. So this is fascinating. The hermaphroditic plants produce nectar every day and refill the nectaries, the part of the plant that makes the nectar, faster. And
Uh,
so this is very interesting. Yeah. So some of those are like ceanothus, which is a gorgeous native. It's one of my absolute favorites. And I didn't realize this, but it comes in so many different varieties. Like you don't have to have a tree, but you could have a little mini tree that's
mm-hmm.
like waist high, or you could have one that's really low. And there's even a ground cover. It's
Mm-hmm.
called the California lilac because unless you're in the mountains in California, we're not cool enough for lilacs, but or maybe you're in a canyon, you can pull it off. But it's really beautiful. It's a blue, kind of a bluish, sometimes bluey. I don't
Purple.
know,
I say purple because
almost,
it's,
yeah,
it's,
almost
yeah.
purple,
And there
blue.
there are even white ceanothus, and
Yep,
there's a whole range of them. And you're right, there are sizes that
yeah.
get like 8 by 8 or 4 by 4 or ground
It's just
cover.
a gorgeous
Yeah.
color. Yeah, and it's a gorgeous plant. You're gonna be pleased looking at it. It blooms for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
multiple months, and it can bloom in actually 2 seasons of the year. And that's because winter is the new spring, and then we also
Yes.
get spring. And our June is now sort of turning into a spring for Southern California at least. So the other one is what else? Hermaphroditic plant that blooms, has a long nectaring. Hibiscus, squash, okra, and when you're growing squash, you're supporting the squash bee because those are the only plants that they get pollen from.
Mm-hmm.
And those little boy bees sleep in those squash flowers. They're so adorable.
Mm-hmm.
They steal my heart. What else? The nectar secretion duration and recharge rates of all of the plants varies by species and cultivar. One of the best that you can plant is borage.
Oh,
And
borage is so
borage,
beautiful too.
stunning, and it has edible flowers that taste a little sweeter than cucumber. And you can also use this plant, I'll explain it later when I get to another one that you can do this with, to chop and drop. I'll explain it later. But you can also, if you have like, say your parkway, you covered it with heavy, heavy cardboard layers, and then you mulched it heavily, got rid of all the grass and all the weeds, and you're like, what do I do now? And you want to add really good nitrogen and make the soil healthier in a really inexpensive way. You just drop down some borage seed. You don't even have to barely cover with dirt. You just cast it literally and water it, and you're going to have a field of borage, and you will have just, invigorated your soil and filled it with nutrients.
Yeah,
And
I have borage that reseeds itself every year in my garden. It's just mulch, and I pull out the dead ones, and but I wait till they're dead and to pull them out, because then the seeds have dropped and then they come back next year tenfold.
yep. So, and borage is one of the fanciest plants that all my fancy chefs want to use, all the Michelin star chefs. And the nectaries of the borage plant, those flowers refill every 2 minutes. Literally, they are like,
What?
yeah, they are like nectar fountains, like champagne
Wow.
nectar, yeah, fountains. They're amazing. Um, so what else is at the top? Cornflower, which is also called bachelor button, also edible and beautiful, and comes in such a variety of colors and is petite, and can go in a cut flower, inside as well. You can have some joy for you and bring it in, and you can also feed pollinators. It's fantastic. Berries, flowering berries. You want to plant those in spring from your canes that you get. They're called. It's a weird thing, but
Mhm.
I know that
I know.
Christy has covered this for sure.
Blackberry
So
and raspberries, folks, they come on
yeah,
canes. Yeah.
if you don't know what that is, find her episode. I'm sure she's covered it
Yeah.
9 times.
I have a whole
All
video on how to prune your blackberries. It's long.
good.
Yeah.
Everybody needs that. That's winter studies. Um, all the salvias, which are so beautiful. All Russian sage is my absolute favorite, and that is so beautiful. And that is one of the best for nectar. Catnip, go figure.
Hmm.
Um, Wisteria, if you're going to plant that, I recommend you do it somewhere away from your house. They've pretty, or in a ginormous pot with a trivet. The root system can be invasive, but they are so beautiful. Those are fantastic.
And
Sea
like
holly.
I'm sorry, just back up real quick.
Yeah.
With wisteria, you need a really sturdy trellis, like 3-inch diameter solid posts, or like stainless steel, like
Pergola. You
really
need a pergola,
pergola.
or
Yeah,
yeah.
we rebuilt our pergola because our wisteria had pulled it off of its legs and was listing diagonally to one
Yep.
side. We're like, we're not gonna no, we have to rebuild this. So sorry, I interrupted, but I
No, no,
wanted
no.
to interject that. So your next
And
one was
alternatively, if that scares people, they can put wisteria in like a 4-foot wide pot, literally like a pot that takes 2 people or bigger, more to hug.
okay.
And make sure you put a trivet under it. It will thrive and it will do okay in a pot that large. You just have to feed it a little more often.
Okay.
And then, okay, penstemon, which are gorgeous. California fuchsia. Oh my gosh, that's like that stunning hot orange red. It's like putting jewel tones in your garden. So pleasing. Verbena, and most of these really can go through the hottest of summer. Lamb's ear, when it's,
Stackies. Yay.
yes, it's also called stackies. Alyssum, repeat everywhere. So good.
I've been sharing people your study that you did, your research you did about alyssum warding off the Asian citrus psyllid better than the
Yes,
conventional
thank
methods.
you.
So
Thank
yay,
you.
spread the word, spread the word.
Yes, yes, yes. Plant that under all your citrus trees, which is also on my list down here. Alliums, poppies, foxglove, which is also called digitalis. They make a heart medication from it. The bees like to snuggle into each one of those blooms. It looks like they're going into a sleeping bag. It's adorable. Cardoon, heather, rudbeckia, which is black-eyed Susan, bouteillea. For herbs, rosemary, which we have all witnessed. I think rosemary just saves half the pollinators in the late summer and fall because it's the only thing blooming and around.
Yeah.
Oregano. When you let your, you know what? Years and years and years ago, that's when I fell in love with you first, because you said lazy gardeners are the best friends of pollinators because you let your herbs bloom.
Yeah.
And that is, you're providing food. And
yeah.
I was like, she's my friend. So I'm back to, okay, basil, calamine, lavender, which is not native, but it's definitely, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe it's
it's
naturalized.
it's Mediterranean, and it's pretty much been naturalized here.
It's such a good match for our climate. And so then we're back to comfrey, which, like borage, is not something that people typically know of, but both of those you can find seed for. They're both so easy to seed, that meaning plant, that all you have to do is toss them. We call it casting in the garden world. It literally can be the laziest planting ever. You just throw it, and wherever you plant, if it gets some water for 3 or 4 days, kind of off and on after that, then it's going to make it. And it's pretty resilient, doesn't need a lot of water once it's established. Those plants, you can cut the leaves off. You can even cut them almost to the ground. As long as you leave some of the plant, you can cut all the leaves, like all of the bigger leaves. You can leave the little ones, and you can put them in a bucket, and you can cover it with water and leave it for a few days and make a stinky tea that's actually really great. And you can pour it on your soil or use it as a foliar spray. And these are also great for chop and drop. We cut the biggest leaves off, the ones that look the worst, and we just lasagna layer them on top of, and then mulch on top of those. And then that's just so good to feed your soil. They're extra nutrient rich, and they're really great flowers for pollinators, many pollinators, and they're very low in water use. For trees, I have citrus, which Chrissy has a whole book on. You should go buy it. And then
Thank you. You're
apple,
so nice.
which you want to get a low
Low chill
zone. Yeah,
right.
low chill zone, like your stone fruit, same thing.
Yeah.
Low chill zone one if you're not in a canyon and don't get a freeze.
And so there are 4 varieties, maybe a 5th. We can do Anna. Low chill varieties, by the way, are Anna. Fuji is on the cusp. I actually have a productive Fuji. I have it up against a wall that gets morning shade, so I think that's what's giving me the extra oomph, little chill in the morning. Dorset Golden and Pink Lady are the 4 that we can grow in low chill areas.
Oh, I absolutely love Pink Lady.
Yeah, those are the ones.
Awesome. Okay, so what low chill mean is that it's like it means that you don't get a freeze where you live, then you need something that has those trees need a freeze typically, but they can still produce fruit and flowers in our areas that don't get cold anymore. So
Yeah.
it'll still work for you. Then I already covered, oh, jacaranda. You know, you see the jacaranda all over LA. They burst with purple confetti and we all celebrate. And you know, I always drive by those and wonder who the hell is watering this. Sometimes they're in the middle of these street thing, you know, like
The
in the middle.
parkway. Yeah,
Yeah, the
I
parkway.
know.
And you're like, there's no water here.
Yeah, and they make such a beautiful mess, as I like to say,
Yeah,
because they people are like, oh, they're terrible. I'm like, no, they're pretty, and I mean, who doesn't want to walk on a carpet of purple flowers? Come on,
right. And
right?
they're literally humming with
With
bees.
bees, yeah,
Yeah, for a long period. I just saw one the other day that was still in bloom. And that's since, you know, June. That's really great.
it's impressive.
So, and then also the chaste tree, which I am not familiar with, but
I'm
that
not
is
either. Yeah.
super low. It's got aromatic lavender blooms and it's called Vitex Angus Castu. Um,
Okay.
and then
And the
what else did
list probably goes on and on. I love that you have 2 pages of notes to talk
I
about
do.
this.
Yeah.
But I want to point people, I will point people in the direction of this article so they can get kind of a quick summary, and I will list all of these things that you shared with us today in the blog post that goes along with this, because I want to ask you about something else, which
Yep.
you have done some research on, and this was one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you back on, is because of your research on monarch caterpillars and their predators, which is not something you hear a lot about.
Nope.
We've been seeing an uptick in dead chrysalises. They turn black and the caterpillars never emerge from them. So you were posting on Instagram that you were keeping track. What kind of numbers in terms of ratios of dead to living chrysalises have you been seeing lately?
So I started paying attention and doing counts. And I did counts of how they died and what they look like. And you know, this these splotchy dead chrysalises that have black splotches on them, they're often thought they were called previously Black Death.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got curious. So here's the thing. I'm sorry to say that I'm a gross person now, but I'm also a curious gross person. So it happens. So when you have a beehive, you start touching like larvae and you have to. It just happens. So it desensitizes you and all of a sudden you're touching bugs and their larvae and you don't think it's gross anymore. So I got curious about that blotchy monarch chrysalis, all of them, and I wondered, I was very suspect about this idea of Black Death. And so I cut it open and voila, in every single one I dissected, I found tachinid fly, which is a parasitic fly, and it's a good fly. Don't hate on it. It's a great fly that farmers use instead of pesticides on crops. It's a really great fly when they parasitize the cabbage moth instead of using pesticides, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
terrible fly when it's your monarch butterfly caterpillar. So
Right.
there's the problem. And because it's probably, you know, not been hit at all or been hit so much less than monarch butterflies have been hit with whatever they're up against, that the numbers are so out of proportion that it's an ecosystem imbalance. So it's okay in my mind to reduce, you know, some of the numbers if we can keep the numbers of monarchs up. But that's, you know, also a question. You know, do we hit another population of another insect to save another one? What other ecosystem swing will we create? So it's a thing. But monarchs are in trouble, and in Southern California, there's been a study on how often these get hit in other states, and I looked at those studies and I contacted Chip, who's the lead scientist. My mentor is Randy Oliver from scientificbeekeeping.com, and he studied with and was pals with Chip from monarchwatch.org. And I said, I need someone to do a study with because I'm seeing about 80%. And the studies I've looked at that are out there that Monarch Watch has done, are reporting only 15% of their monarchs are getting hit with takinid fly. And you'll see some of I have these all documented in many posts on my Instagram. If you want to go to all the posts that have butterflies, caterpillars, or milkweed, you can learn a lot. And it shows images of all the stages. So from caterpillar to chrysalis, you can see what it looks like and how it presents. But I would suspect it was much greater than we thought. And I talked to him and reached out to him. That's who my mentor recommended. And he said, you are correct. California is in big trouble, and Southern California more so than Northern. But reports are definitely following up with what you're witnessing. And we definitely need a study. So if you have money and need somewhere to spend it, you can donate to monarchwatch.org. They desperately need money for 2 studies. Everything is a hypothesis until you have 2 studies
that prove it.
And we and we need 2 published, and we need 2 in Southern California desperately. And so he was really excited that I had reached out and said that the regulations in California, now that the monarchs are on the extinction list, it's good and bad. It's very bad for Southern California because until we have a study that creates an exception, you're not supposed to touch eggs, chrysalises, or caterpillars, or plants that have any of those on them. And Chip literally told me, we need people to touch them. We need people to separate them from the takinid fly and take those numbers down. One thing you can do without breaking the law, being a butterfly renegade of mine, one thing you can do is you can reach out to an insectary. I use arbicoorganics.com. I do not order online. Always call them, because you're ordering something that you don't know how to receive. And these are insects, they come frozen. You need to be home. You need to talk to them about it and know what to expect and not have dead insects sitting on your porch that you paid for. So that's how I call them, and they will get you the right species for your square footage. It's very hard to figure out on your own on their site.
I have to ask. So because I recommend Arbico Organics a lot for parasitic nematodes and other beneficial insects that come in. But so we're toggling this balance between some importing takinid flies to protect against cabbage moths or cabbage worms and other stuff like that, but we don't want too many. So are we now finding something that parasitizes takinid flies? What are we ordering there?
Yes, yes. And I spent 2 years talking to the insectary at Arbico, the owner. She's wonderful. And she was like, no one's ever tried to do this, Robin. And I was like, I need to parasitize the parasite, the parasite. But, we have to remember that takinid fly numbers could also be somewhat falsely larger than they should be, because farmers are using them, because they're ordering these from insectaries as well. So that's one of the reasons their population could be out of whack. And the other is that likely that monarch butterfly populations are declining so rapidly. Right. And so you can install beneficial nematodes in your soil. You want to know the temperature that's right for where you are located to do that. And you want to know how to do it accurately so that you don't waste your money. And I find it to be incredibly beneficial for the garden as well. Right now we have those giant beetles flying around and laying their grubs, eggs in all your soil that are going to eat your plants. The other day one bit me. And
chicken shrimp, we call them chicken shrimp, those grubs.
If you have chickens, yes.
But you can also, so what I've done is I've left them out in a bucket because they can't climb out of the bucket. And the raccoons or crows will come at night and take them.
Raccoons would love those.
They love them. And in the morning you find the bucket tipped over and all the grubs are gone. It's pretty cool.
I didn't know that crows, my dog will eat them. It's terrifying.
Okay, that's weird.
I don't let him.
So what is the parasitoid of the parasitoid?
It's a beneficial nematode.
Oh, okay. So what is it? Steinernema feltiae?
I don't know. You are super advanced. Wow, listen to you.
I will look it up and put it in the show notes. All right. So so the beneficial nematode, which is great because we're treating at the soil level, and then that cuts that interrupts the life cycle of the tachinid fly, and then, but you're not harming anything else.
Right. And it's Sherry Frey from Arbicore Organics, the owner, that worked with me on this.
Okay, got it.
And when you guys order, you should mention Christy Garden Nerd. And when you call on the phone, you should say she's an affiliate to make sure she gets $1
Oh,
because she
that's so
deserves
nice.
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
She deserves it and needs it.
So this is really a huge topic. We could be talking about this. We've already been talking about it for a while, but most people have been thinking that the reason why the monarchs, the caterpillars are dying is because of OE, which I'm going to butcher in saying this, or Ophiurocistus electroschira, if that's
You
right.
said it. You did so much better than I do.
I'm
So
reading
bravo.
it, so I'm
You're
phonetically
still
reading.
better than I am.
And so, but your theory is not that it's the tachinid fly instead. And what that looks like is that when the chrysalis or the caterpillar has been parasitized, what it looks like is there's like a white thread coming out from them.
Often, yes. In
Okay.
fact, I have videos of it.
Okay.
And I've cut open the ones that doesn't happen to, and I can tell you, it's all observational, so this is not real data, but I did take data, and I raised over almost 2,000 monarchs in a year. And
Amazing.
with gardens and other projects and raising them outside in the wild, even more than that, like you could triple that. But I have, over 2 years of about 15, 1600, 14 to 1600, and it's about 80%. And when they peak is when we get warm. So in Southern California, we don't get warm until July. And summer doesn't even show up until July. And that's when they peak. So OE is a bacterial parasite. Yes. That co-evolved with the monarch butterfly. I've said that incorrectly. That's why I paused. It co-evolved with the monarch butterfly, and it is not something that another butterfly can catch, nor a human, but it spreads through the plant, through the egg that mama monarch lays, onto the plant. Sometimes, usually the caterpillar little baby egg eats its way out of its own egg, the caterpillar, and first thing it eats is this egg, and then it has ingested some of those cells. So those spore loads of that parasite actually spread through every time that monarch butterfly lands. So when your plants get tall, they've got more spore loads on them. So I have multiple videos about how to cut your milkweed on social media and when. And if you have more than one milkweed plant, it's ideal to phase your cuttings and lay them next to the other plants. That way, because I have really good vision with my contacts in, and and I still miss them sometimes. And it's because they are really teeny tiny.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to miss, and it's just easier to lay the plant cuttings next to something else and let them crawl back up onto the other host plant that you have, and phase your cuttings. And if you start phasing your cuttings in July, beginning of July, and keep cutting and phasing through September end, you could even go through October end. We start to get cooler in the evenings in November, you will reduce tachinid fly tremendously. You have to know that your pollinator garden, your butterfly garden, is sadly raising more tachinid fly than it is monarch butterflies August through October. July through October, really.
So it's raising tachinid flies and OE?
Yes. If you haven't cut your plants, yes.
Okay.
And Xerces, which is one of the pollinator experts out there, it tells people a blanket recommendation of that you should cut your milkweed at Christmas. You should not. Our monarch butterflies in Southern California go all the way through mid-February.
Yeah, I if you look at the map, and this is something that has always confused me, because not only Xerces, but the Theodore Payne Foundation talks about cutting milkweed down in the fall, and I'm like, but monarchs overwinter here in this area,
and ours
we
are
need the
still
milkweed here.
laying all the way through
Yeah.
to beginning of February, sometimes through to the end. They're still, it depends on our temperatures.
Yeah.
So you also are going to get that last seasons of Monarchs. That last season is our spring season. So when you say the winter counts are low, or you say the spring counts are low, that's because you cut your milkweed down.
Yeah.
You're not helping.
Right.
That's not helping. Also, the winter, those cooler, so November, December, January to February 15th ish, those that's 4 months that you offset the 4 months of heat, July, August, September, October, where you don't want your plants tall and the OE is really higher. And I have to say though, the OE takes out such a lower percentage. At the most, it's 20% it affects of the monarchs. To kind of wipes out 80% in Southern California. It's a
Amazing.
massive, it's the reason why people go into their butterfly gardens and say, we had so many caterpillars and chrysalises and now there are none. What happened? And they think birds, or they come up with all these reasons, and
Yeah.
somebody spray, and none of them are the reason.
No. And I've watched a spider walk away with a baby monarch caterpillar. That is not the main reason.
It's
Okay.
not the majority of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my
80%
God.
is high. Yeah, 80% is high. Someone just asked me on social media, they were like, my father's about to rip out his butterfly garden. I said, when you accept that you are raising 80%, that only 20% are going to make it July through October, and you cut your milk, like I said, you can just cut that milkweed down repeatedly those months if you want. That is a way to not have to buy any beneficial bugs or do anything fancy. And that alone reduces OE, reduces to kind of fly. And then you can, you're going to get a boom in November as soon as we get cooler, and the to kind of fly larvae die.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I feel like, God, I'm about to ask you, it's tip time, but you've just given us like a ton. Do you have
What's
anything
my
else
tip?
you'd like
My
to
tip
share?
is drip irrigation,
Okay.
people. It is the game changer in gardening. It will save your life. Drip irrigation. And my other tip is don't put your garden bed next to a tree.
God, please don't put your garden bed next to a tree. I have a whole video on this, on why most vegetable gardens become underproductive
Are
in under 2
failed.
years, or
Yeah.
fail in 2 years. It's the roots, people, the tree roots. So
Yeah.
that's what's
They
going
don't
on.
believe
So
you. They
yeah,
don't
I know.
believe you.
But you're not going to do it. And like out beyond the canopy, folks, out beyond the canopy of the tree, because those roots travel as far out as least to the drip line of the
You're not
canopy.
even supposed to step on the underneath the canopy.
Yeah. So
Ever.
I know. And every landscape designer out there is like planting pretty flowers in the root zone of the tree. I'm like, they don't want the same kind of water, and don't do it. So just don't do it. All right. Keep it, like, put a mulch ring around there and just like, that's
Yep.
it. That's it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Robin, for being here on the Gardener Tip of the Week podcast. Can you share your information where people can find you? Because you
Okay, yes, you can
referred
find
to
me
that a lot.
on TikTok, God save me, on Instagram, on Twitter. I have a holding place website. You can email me at honeygirlgrows@gmail.com. My website's really lame, but it's honeygirlgrows.com. Someday it won't be lame.
And
I'm
what's your
just too
handle
busy.
on, I know. I'm surprised we were able to schedule this. I've been trying to schedule this for months. What's your handle on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter?
Honey Girl Grows, like grows a garden with a G.
Got it. Okay. All right, garden nerds. This was an action-packed episode. I hope you enjoy this this episode. That's it for this week. Subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. We're also going to put all of these things in the show notes. So go to gardenerd.com to find out more about everything we talked about today. Show your support for this podcast and the other free stuff on Garden Nerd by becoming a Patreon subscriber. You'll find us on Instagram and Twitter under Garden Nerd 1, on Facebook as gardenerd.com, and of course, our Garden Nerd YouTube channel. Happy gardening!